Sophia wants to play the piano, but in becoming good, she has to sacrifice swimming. She has to sacrifice her friends. She has to sacrifice watching TV. Not only is it too much for her, I think it'll be too much for us as well. She's putting all of her eggs in one basket. What if it doesn't turn out the way she or we wanted it to turn out? What then? So, and we'll never become good because we never take a leap of faith. We never just find ourselves interested and passionate about one single thing to devote ourselves. So, we become mediocre at everything, never good at anything, and certainly not proficient in anything. And so most of our ideas and assumptions, they really mean nothing. It wouldn't be a bad idea for... When Hussein gave me the Bible and said, just focus on the four Gospels and write down all the parables. The book was in Persian, and so I wrote all the parables in Persian, and then I had to memorize them. But again, it took me many years to have a dim, very kind of mediocre understanding of what they could mean. It wouldn't be a bad idea to, since technology is available, to just go to Google and just say, list all the parables in the Gospels. And then, print them out. And, in your own way, just write commentary about each of the parable that you read, according to your own understanding. And don't plagiarize, don't go to Bart Ehrman and see what he says about those things. Because that's his stuff. You need to kind of find your way, into the parables through whatever lives inside you. Because I really do believe that these stories in the four Gospels, they contain all the wisdoms that anybody needs to kind of understand some very, very important things about themselves and about life. You don't need to roam the world and read all these books. But you do need to read books to have enough ideas and insights and to be able to connect the dots well. Stacy, anything?
Is there any value when one sees their worst qualities in seeking a type of better reaction to that? For example, is there greater value in going through maybe the emotional reaction of despair compared to seeking the function of seeing one's worst qualities.
Can you give me an example?
Well, for instance, if there is a feeling of shame, is it, and the feeling of shame is consuming, is it, as a student on the path, is there a greater value in the emotional reaction to shame, which can feel immense, or is there greater value in trying to step back and say, what is the function of shame? Does that...
I think to be able to step back and look at something, not be impacted by what it is that you're witnessing, and then being able to cut it open to see what lives inside of it, and then have the resource and the expertise and the proficiency not to allow what you see impact you negatively. That's something that is usually not accessible to students who are not very advanced, whatever that may mean. I don't really know what makes someone a student. I don't know what advanced or novice or any of those things are. All I remember is, I think the best way to respond to your question is the movie The Last Castle, and it's a scene we've talked about a few times, which is Robert Redford is like a captain in a military setting, and he disobeyed his superiors, and as a consequence, 100 people lost their lives. He's sent into this military prison. All the inmates are military people. And so the person who's the guardian of this prison system wants to show his lieutenant the grandness of this captain. So he creates a fight between the inmates. Everybody gets involved, because the moment the fight breaks out, you take sides. And then pity and compassion, all that stuff, anger, because you're pent up in a prison. You would just punch something, anything. There's a scene in the movie, Remember the Titans, where Denzel Washington is this African American coach. It's around the time where racism is still, segregation is a big deal still in America. And he asked this big kid, what are you doing here? He says, look at me. I just thought I should sign up. I could sign up and just, run over some people. And the point is, the fight breaks out. People have all these emotions inside them, and so they join the fight. It's only Robert Redford who stands back, very detached, arms folded together, and he just looks at this entire scenario. And this man looks at his lieutenant and says, see, there's a reason why he was made a captain. His only flaw was that he disobeyed. That was the only thing. Now, how many battles had he been in? About 50, 60. What do you learn in all these battles? Well, the first one, you're a little frightened, you're a little shaky. You can't really trust your own judgment. You're afraid of death. And as time goes on, you learn a bit more. You understand a bit more about yourself, about war, about death, about the enemy, about your own people. And there comes a point where you need to make decisions, but not on your emotions. Those decisions need to come from a good understanding because you have people's lives in your hand. You know? So when you ask how does one react to a certain event that triggers all these emotions, well, if you're still at a place where your emotions can be triggered, there isn't much you can do. I mean, these are all like tiny little battlefields. You need to go through enough of them until something just inspires you, happens to you, where you say, okay, I think I've been here before plenty of times. And then you're able to kind of take baby steps, you know. And we all have our own disabilities at different areas of life, you know. You may be really patient with your patients, but you may not be very patient with your dog, you know. Or you may be very patient with your mom, but you may not be very patient with your sister. And let's just say you say to yourself, I want to be as patient with my sister as I am with my mom. But the only way that can happen is first, I mean, I don't know, spending a good amount of time with your sister where she has the power to push all sorts of buttons inside and just keep exploding. And then your mother on the side says, honey, be careful. And this needs to happen over and over and over again until you just don't feel anything and your sister has no power over you. Then you can kind of slowly be able to, you know. But I think for most of us novices, the best thing that, you know, we may hope to do is put your physical body in environments where you can experience the emotions you enjoy. You know, it'd be foolish for a novice to put themselves in danger. And all of us are novices in some shape or form, you know. You know, it has taken me many, many years to just say, I just don't want to just invite just anyone to the house. I want to invite people who stay in touch. You know, I'd rather watch TV if someone is to come here and then disappear for, you know, a year. Just not seeing them is enough better for me. Because it is an investment. You know, I can spend time with the kids. I can wash dishes. I can rest. But it has taken many, 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 many decades for me to get that. You know, and I think Gurdjieff was right in many ways, that people don't appreciate what they get for free, and they have to pay. And it doesn't mean that you have to pay in dollar bills. You have to pay with sacrifices, you know. And your sacrifices, you know, express how much you want something. If you're not making any sacrifice, you don't want to make any payments. Well, you know, I'm not going to put my family through hell so that, you know, I can have a conversation and feel good about myself. It's not worth it for me. And again, I think for us, all of us, it's not a bad idea to kind of figure out what works for you. You know, you don't need to put yourself through unnecessary pains by thinking that you are something that you are not. I'm not Job. I can't suffer too many losses in my life. You know, I'm building something in the back, and you know, it's kind of like a little tiny room. But through a good amount of pain and damage to my body, I've come to realize I'm no longer 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50. I need to go very, very slow. So I spend an hour a week. That's it. And that hour that I spend, it takes me a few days to recover. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is you got to go through a lot of mistakes, through a lot of catching, through a lot of shame, through a lot of regret and remorse and pain, and cursing yourself until you get it. But until then, it's best to kind of, as much as your knowledge allows you, your insights, to say, okay, this is where I want to go. I don't need to test myself. When I'm ready to test something, I'll go out there and test it. When you read Daughter of Fire, for example, it's important to understand that Irina's vision was not very clear. She was in love with this teacher of hers. So she missed, and good for her, by the way, she missed to detail a lot of human qualities, a lot of qualities that make us so imperfect. And that's another wonderful thing that happens to us once you begin to work with someone. You don't see them behaving the way that most ordinary human beings behave. I think as a general rule, anyone you need to listen to, they need to be over the age of 75, 80, whose memories and reflective abilities are intact, that they're able to kind of go back to their life and see things, examine things, understand things, and bring them to the foreground and say, this is how you understand, this is what you need to go through, and no 34-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old. None of them have this capacity. It's impossible. And I think if you desire to become proficient, anything that's valuable, you really need to bleed and you need to sweat and you need to go through a hell of a time to become really good at it. It's something that Idris Shah used to say, that he said truth has a tendency of protecting itself, but I think anything that is valuable, really, really valuable, diamond hides itself in the belly of the mountain. If you want it, you just gotta, go there with a couple of dynamites and just break things open and be dusty and sweaty and stinky and keep at it until you find something. That's how it is. If you want to always be able to combat negative emotions, catch yourself, in some ways, you really need someone like Gurdjieff who will push buttons, who will have no mercy on you, will never say good things about you. and that you yourself will have the capacity to endure all the difficulties that this person will give you, and you're not going to run away, because all of us have a certain self-image, you know, and that self-image for the most part is the very thing that obstacles our growth. And if that person, you know, pushes buttons, if you allow yourself not to run but to stay, if you're there, then over time, you know, there is this beautiful scene in the book that Cassie's going to take home. You know, Olga and Gurdjieff have this really huge argument in the car. It's raining, it's dark, the roads are bad. And Olga and Thomas are sitting in the back seat, and Olga, you know, says to Gurdjieff, "Can you just go a little slower?" And like they were going about 40 miles an hour. And all of a sudden Olga realized that Gurdjieff is going 50. Says, "Gurdjieff, please, you know, you were going 40 and that was too much for me. Now you're going 50. Just, can you go a little slower?" And now he's going 70. And she's unable to contain herself. She screams and she demands that the car be stopped, and he stops the car, and she gets out in the rain. And Thomas says, "Well, it's my wife. What am I going to do? Just stay in the car?" He leaves as well. They're both standing in the rain. And she says, after like a minute, we saw a car and it was Gurdjieff. We got in the car and we went home. He drove, you know, much slower. We went home, and the entire period we were very, very quiet. She desired the car to go slow. He pushed buttons to see whether she can contain herself, and she failed the test. And she disrespected her teacher. But Gurdjieff had the capacity to overcome that, to turn around and carry them home. This is a very, very seasoned human being, you know. And unfortunately, that's just the way we grow, with a lot of poking and pulling and pushing. There is no other way. You know, there is this wonderful little piece that Michael Segru has in the, you know, Dialogues of Plato, that there is no royal road to understanding. You know, it's not like there is no chat GPT, is it? You know, if you really want to write an essay that's filled with understanding, you got to read a lot of books. You got to come to realize you don't understand anything. You have to begin your journey again. This time, there's a different part of you that needs to be involved in this quest. Not just your body and not just your intellect and not just your emotions. Something else needs to kick in, and you don't know what that is. And then after 50, 60 years, you realize, you know, Levi Strauss, you know, he came to realize that if you really want to understand the culture, you just got to live in the culture. You can't just read a book about a culture. You can't go to a workshop. You can't listen to a lecture, someone telling you about the culture. You have to like just go in. You know, and it's a great book. If you, I don't know if it's in print or not. It's called Gang Leader for a Day. It's such a beautiful book. It's about this Indian guy at the University of Chicago. He was doing his dissertation, Department of Sociology, and he just wanted to understand how gangs work. And his committee initially assumed that he's just going to go to the library, you know, get one of those rooms in the library and just read books. And then, you know, write a book, his dissertation with a lot of footnotes and bibliography. And he said, "No, that's not what I want to do. I actually want to go up close and personal." And they said, I don't think you understand. You're Indian, you know. You're basically categorized as white. You can't go in the projects, you know. They're just going to decapitate you. He says, I don't really care. I want to study something up close and personal. I want to get my hands dirty. And I don't know how long the project took, because I read the book many, many years ago, but eventually, after many, 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 many months, if not years of hard work, he gains the trust of the young kids, then the older kids, then the adults, then the older adults. Then someone takes him to the leader of this space, and they become very close. And he says, I know you see us as criminals, that we get our drugs from this place, we take our drugs to that particular place, we sell our drugs to those people who bring the money. But let me show you what we do with the money. And then, you know, they go to Costco and they go to Walgreens, they buy food and diapers and medicine for all the people in the project. It says, yes, from one perspective, we are criminals. From a different perspective, we're all saints. And it says, if you think what I do is easy, what I'm going to do is this. Monday, next week, you're going to be the gang leader for one day. Pay close attention to everything that I do. On that Monday, you will do all the things that I do. See if you can do it. And he couldn't do it. And the point I suppose I'm trying to make is that, you know, you can learn things in a variety of different ways. You can learn things but have zero understanding. You can learn things, understand things, but not understand the practical application. You just understand. And then there is the practical application, which means that you learn and you understand and you put them into practice to see if they actually work. And then you realize 90% of what you've learned and what you've understood is really just garbage.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Yes, yes. I'm mostly worried for Stacy since she has to work at 8. Anything else?
So I wonder if you could talk more about you talked about students having rocks inside them and that causing them to regress and have to go back over and over again. And then later you talked about all of that stuff becoming like compost for the seed.
You know, I was planting a tree up front, and it was a 15-gallon tree that I had bought from Home Depot. And so the hole has to be relatively, you know, decent size. I had dug a hole that was maybe 1.5 feet deep, and I just wanted perhaps maybe just a bit more, just to be on the safe side. As I dug a little, I realized I'm hitting something that's very, very solid. I said, oh, it's probably concrete. because it's, by the driveway and there's concrete. And I realized, no, this is not concrete. And then I, took out a better shovel and I dug around it and I realized it's a boulder. It's this rock that's, I don't know, it's like 3 feet by 5 feet. It's really, really huge. And I realized that if I had not gone any deeper, what would have happened is I would have planted this tree there. And the root had no place to go. It couldn't go deeper, and eventually it would just die. So what I did, I took out the jackhammer. It took about a couple of days. And I just broke that solid rock into pieces. And what that does, it creates enough, paths for the roots to go inside. And then the roots will kind of grab these tiny little pebbles and make the tree's place more stable, But I had to make sure that there is no solids that are going to be an obstacle to the roots so it can eventually hit the soil. There is nothing wrong with thorns, and we all have thorns because that's what life creates. Life creates experiences. We don't have the proper tools to understand the experience, to be okay with some experiences. Some of them are going to be like rocks. They're like clogging this artery, I mean, let's say you have been hurt by love. Well, there is a part of you that desires to be touched, desires to laugh, desires to be intimate, desires to be seen, to be visible, to be comfortable, to be held. So someone comes into your life and gives you what you've been dreaming for many, many years. But all of a sudden, this rock all of a sudden comes up. If it's not a rock, it's a community of thorns that all of a sudden spring up. You have this flower that just entered your life. And the task of these thorns, and it's really for the most part out of, you want to protect yourself. Something about you knows that life is dangerous. People are dangerous. You yourself are a danger to yourself because you don't understand things well. So, as a protective measure, whenever anyone gets close to you, you push them away. So all of us have rocks inside us in some shape or form. The only question that remains is, if someone enters into your life and is a rose, but you have a good amount of thorns or weeds inside you that will eventually suffocate and kill the flower, will the flower be patient enough to go to Home Depot, get a weed whacker, and slowly get rid of the thorns or the weeds? There was a movie with Jackie Chan and Will Smith's son, Jaden Smith, I think, a Karate Kid. Jackie Chan was a great martial artist, but his wife and his son, I think, died in a car accident, and every year he fixes this car and then hammers the hell out of it, breaks everything. And he doesn't teach martial arts to anyone anymore. He just, he's a janitor of sorts, he fixes apartments and things that are broken in this apartment complex. The relationship between this kid and this man who gets drunk on a daily basis grow. And this relationship blossoms. And this kid goes to him and says, I know you know martial arts because I've seen you beat up some people. Teach it to me. He says, no. Teach it to me, no. He loves this kid and he loves his mother. They're, good people and they like him too, but he refuses to teach this kid because of a certain experience that he had. And this experience was traumatic. It's like weeds and rocks that live inside us that don't allow anything good to take root because we're afraid of losing it. But his love and care for this kid grows. This kid's love and care for this man grows. And eventually, because of the love and the care that they have for one another, he is able to push the weeds away, get rid of them, or push the rocks away until they have a really, really good and healthy relationship. I don't know if I had any rocks or any weeds inside me when I met Hussein. I was just a young kid. Played soccer, sang, worked at Shell gas station, graveyard shift. The confusion that all 18, 19-year-olds have. That was it. Did I fear intimacy? No, I never had intimacy. I mean, it's not something that our culture really talked about. So there was nothing for me to feel if I get close to this man, I'm going to lose something very important. None of those things existed. But weeds and rocks are like attachments. There are certain things that you're attached to because you find them to be valuable in some shape or form. You find the pain to be valuable. You find joy to be valuable. You find your identity to be valuable. So whenever someone wants to, for example, educate you, and by educate, I don't mean going to school. I mean educate, bring something out that they see inside you, but you refuse to let that thing become free. You hold it within. Or maybe you don't even know they exist, but the other person sees it. And so you resist it. You resist it for a variety of different reasons. Maybe you're just far too innocent, you don't really know. Maybe you do know, but you've been hurt. And when you willingly refuse to allow things to come out, it means that there is something about you that has gone through some event in life. And it has caused you enough pain and sorrow that you don't allow yourself to act or behave naturally, to free flow. You take one step forward and 5 backwards. You flirt, but you don't make commitment. It also depends if the person you're working with is young or old, how experienced or how inexperienced they are. The younger the person is that you're working with, the more ambitious they are, the more delusional they are. Because when you lack experience, you have all these grand ideas about yourself. It's like, what's his name? Caitlyn Jenner. He had an interview with Diane Sawyer some time ago. And in the interview, he said, well, she's a she now. She says, you and I are going to change the world. It's a moment of inspiration. It has really no depth. She doesn't understand the social complications. She doesn't understand human identity. She doesn't understand politics. She doesn't understand parents. She doesn't understand religion, but in a moment of inspiration, she kind of comes up with this really catchy phrase. It's quite inspirational. We're going to change the world, you know. But it's hollow, it's empty. But someone who has a lot of experience, I think what they usually like to do is sit back and just write books. They don't talk to people, they just write books. If you have someone who really cares for you, and they have the energy, the time, the patience, and they see you valuable, they have to see you as something that serves some purpose, some valuable purpose, you know, that you're useful. Because if you're not useful, you know, it's kind of like what the devil tells Osokin, you know, in the chapter, that, you know, you really are not useful to anyone. You're not useful to life. You're not useful to yourself. You're just a waste. So do this. Since your life is a waste, why don't you give it to me? You know, you're like this wet clay. You're outside in the scorching sun. In about an hour, you're going to become as hard as a rock. And then you're just going to be trashed. Since that's going to be your fate, why not just give yourself to me? Let me make you into a nice little dish. And then you'll be in the cupboard. And then we can have food on this plate every single day. And what the devil tells Osikins is that since your life is going to be a waste, give it to me. I don't want your entire life. Just give me 10 years of it. Give me 5 years of it. Let me plant seeds inside you. And you will see those seeds grow. You will like what you see. You know. And it's difficult to submit yourself to just anyone. It takes too much, unless you love them, unless you care for them, unless the relationship is very, very intense. You know, we had a friend here. I told her when I think I first met her, she was 21 or 22. She had just graduated from, I don't know, psychology in Davis. She was 22, 23. I said, go to Sac State, do your humanities, you can start teaching. Oh no, school sucks. Oh, school is bad. Oh, school is this. She wasn't ready to submit. Time passed. She became a masseuse. Then she became a house cleaner. Then she became this. Then she became that. Then again, at a certain point, I said to her, go to school, get your degree. But this time she was ready. And that's the thing about all the stuff. You can't make the grass grow by pulling it. She wasn't ready. And then for some strange reason, you say something to her, she says yes. She goes to school, gets a degree, and a year later she's teaching 25 classes. And then a lot of different things fall into place. You know, it doesn't mean that your life is smooth. It just means certain parts of your life that were in disarray, now they have a relative amount of harmony and balance in them. I think that's the only way you can deal with the thorns. That's the only way you can deal with the rocks. There are no other ways that I can think of. You know, someone really needs to kind of see you, like you, be willing to sacrifice. And remember, good teachers, they really like their time. They enjoy their time. They value their time. They're not interested in hit and run. You know. So but you don't really know that you have thorns or rocks inside you until you experience an event that becomes very close to those triggers that you have inside you. all of a sudden the button is pushed and the weeds and the rocks come out. But you won't really understand any of this. You can't see it. You will have a tendency of sabotaging whatever positive may be in that event. You'll morph it into a negative, and then it'll just disappear. You know. The only way that you'll survive anybody being able to remove the thorns, the weeds, and the rocks inside you is if you love someone or something, you will be more than willing to make the sacrifices. Abraham loved God enough to sacrifice Ishmael. It was not a problem for him. Irina loved Bai Sahib to the extent that she was willing to give her everything, including her money, at the age of 60. You know, but it has to be the right kind of passion, the right kind of relationship. You can't just be casual with this stuff because it is dangerous. It's always good to become pregnant with the person whose company you enjoy, whether accidental or planned. You know, if you like Bai Sahib, it's okay to be emotionally pregnant, to lose sleep, to suffer. He'll take you to the place you want to go. If it's Eckhart Tolle, you will not end up anywhere good.